Good evening and welcome to episode 39 of Guru Manthan. And thank you once again for joining us. A series of 50 discussions with educationist thinkers every Saturday, 7 to 8 p.m. The Guru Manthan talks, as many of you here are aware, are being organized under the aegis of the Vivekananda Institute for Leadership Development, which is an initiative of the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement. VLEAD is focused on developing human and social capital for nation building by enhancing the potential of individuals and institutions across the development sector through sustained engagement across four sectors primarily, though we've extended these to other sectors too: the government, NGOs, corporates, and community. And Guru Manthan is an initiative, a platform where we've brought teachers together to discuss, debate, and learn about diverse perspectives and practices in education from across the world. As always, the format of the talk would be that the guest speaker would speak for about 25 minutes, followed by a moderated Q&A, where Praveen and I would be asking questions as well as picking up questions from the chat box, so you can post your questions there. And finally, there would be a concluding remarks. Today, it's a pleasure to have Radhika Srinivas, and she will be talking on what to me is a very intriguing topic: early years, the prana of well-being. And I've tried to put together an introduction. Radhika's profile is as intriguing as the topic she's going to be speaking on. She calls herself a Shishya, an Adhyapaka, an educator who is currently on a sabbatical. She has over 3 decades of experience spanning teaching students, coaching teachers, and heading schools in Delhi, Mumbai, and Europe. And she's looking at setting up a learning space, a sanctuary in the midst of a coffee estate in Kodagu. And I think each one of us is looking forward to this discussion, as I am. So over to you now, Radhika.
Namaste. Namaste, everybody. And hope all of us are fine and there is peace and safe, and all your relatives are safe and good. It's not a very nice time the country is going through. There is mayhem, and I'm only hoping it is a divine mayhem and we come out of it as soon as we can. And so thank you for inviting me into this platform. And I'm a big fan of SVYM, and particularly of the Guru Manthan series. I don't think I've missed a single session, and must congratulate SVYM for bringing some extraordinary perspectives, extraordinary work being done across the country. And I'm honored and privileged to be sharing my perspective on early years. And so let's see, what I really want to get across today. Like Ramesh was saying, the title seems to be very intriguing. So essentially, my intention is to bring to surface, bring to awareness that the early years of an individual's life actually determines the well-being of humanity, of the planet, actually. So it's the lifeline of the planet, of the well-being of people, of every life form, so to say. So prana is the life force, and we all are familiar with that. So let's see, I mean, as I unfold, and we'll figure out what it really involves. So the source of well-being of the planet, as I said, rests on early years. It's the foundation, it's the spring on which, whether it's economic development, whether it's occupational development, well-being, whether it's intellectual well-being, you name it, the source lies there. It may be a little difficult for us to take this, but let us see what happens. So my intention is threefold here: that we are able to see who we are today is a reflection of our early years. When I say early years, we are talking of 0 to 8 years, and right from the conception, of course. Then the intention is also for us to notice how our existing early childhood education programs, which are typically from 3 years to, technically it is from 3 years to 8 years, which we have reduced from 3 years to 5 years right now. These existing early childhood programs being more a fad, I want us to notice this. It's more a lip service that we are giving, and hence it's not able to give us the return of investment it's intended to give. Then the third intention I have is for us to reflect on how we can free our own early childhood programs wherever we are running, whether it's urban or whether it's rural or Anganwadis. We have to free it from our projections and anxieties to help retain the core intent of the early childhood program. So let's have a look at the current scene. I mean, it's inevitable. I didn't want to bring the scene actually, but I think it's inevitable. We have to see where we are right now and just look at the situation we are in. There is no blame game here. There is no, how can I reduce this thing? Okay. Sorry. So there's no blame game here, but we just need to look at the whole situation very objectively and see where we have landed ourselves here today. We are in the midst of a crisis. All we are doing, all we are hearing is just pointing finger. We are blaming somebody or the other. And this is where we are. Look at the economy, look at the, the state we are in terms of discrepancies and discriminations we make, unrest, pandemic. We have, the rural backwardness is still there. The, crossing, the border differences are there. Lack of respect for life we have. There's urban crowding is an understatement. It's a saturation, oversaturation of the urban spaces that we are in. Total disrespect for, rural life, rural living. Mental health issues, religious conversions, you name it. We are in the midst of all this. But what I'm trying to tell you here is we need to stop here and look at the whole thing very objectively and see where we are. And I think the coronavirus has given us that opportunity to stop here and reflect. And hence there is a complete lockdown so that we are able to get the space to look back and reflect and see where really the issue is. Okay. We've come a long way since our, education, since our independence. There's no doubt about it. But yet we need to look at certain things. So here is a bird perched on the tree. And as soon as the bird perches on the branch of the tree, the fruit falls. So the question I have is it the bird's weight that caused the fruit to fall, or is it that the fruit was ready to fall? So this pandemic, not the pandemic, this situation that we are in, is it because of something, or was it meant to be? We don't know. So let's explore this a bit. Sorry. Okay. Look at our post-independence era. We've come a long way from Kothari Commission and NPEs to there are immense number of NPEs that has happened. There has been a national, policy for children in between. To look at where the focus has been. The focus has been in the right place. We've been talking about, restructuring of education. We're talking about 3-language formula. We have been talking about removing or reducing disparities among, groups. We're talking of a good, rich primary education system. We're talking of a child-centered approach. So nothing has been misplaced. So everything has been there, right, glaring at us, and it's been there. It's been on the paper. But on the ground, where are we? So if you look at after the NP 86-92, we've had a spate of reports and investments being done by the nation in the form of Sarva Shiksha Abhiyan, in the form of district primary education program, and all of that. And the RTE came into the scene. And then now we are in the midst of NP 2020. So, we are going, we are saying we have a lot of expectations from the NP, but how is it different? It's been there all over. So the question is, how come? And what has actually not really, what is the gap between what has been on the paper and what's on the ground? And here I'm not even referring to any political or the governance, misgovernance. I'm not talking of corruption. I'm not talking of any of those systems. We are just saying there is a gap between what is being expected, what is being written on the paper, and what is actually happening on the ground. Okay. So I just want a few seconds to be spent on this. See, before independence and much before colonization, we did have a Bharatiya, an Indian education system, which was free, which was available, which was decentralized. And the purpose and the vision of the education then was freedom from the sense of smallness. That was the purpose of education, and education was imparted as per the Varna. Now, let's not get hooked on to this word Varna, because it's the most misused word and it has got nothing to do with the caste system. So it's as per the proclivities of the mind, education was imparted. Then, of course, we all know about what happened in the 12th century, and subsequent to that, the Maculization, and then the Anglicization of the education system, and all of, then we landed ourselves into the Kothari Commission and the NP 1986 and all of that. So from an education system in the ancient India, which was there for the freedom from sense of inadequacy, we are in a space right now where there is immense amount of inadequacy, immense amount of insecurity, unsurety, and erosion of values. Yeah. So, and if you really look at the trajectory, early years has always been important in the education system. Nobody has said that early years has not been important. But what is the kind of sorry, 1 second. The thing is frozen. Oops. Yeah. So early years has always been a very a significant part of growing up in the ancient India. It has played a very significant role. So the only difference was the community, the village, or the families took care of the children. The environment took care of the children's needs. When I say children, the children's needs, which are the preoccupations that the children have between 0 to 8 years, was very well taken care of by the community. So everything was being provided. So when children entered formal schooling, they were already nearing 7. They were completely ready, physically, socially, emotionally, cognitively. They were completely ready to get into a structured form of learning. But that's not what happened once industrialization happened, and Maria Montessori and kindergarten entered India. So the whole structure, a structure was given to the early years. And as the structure was being given, somewhere, we lost the significance of early years. So look at this. This is a very popular, book written by Robert Fulghum. Many of us may be aware of this. So he says, all I really need to know, I learned it in the kindergarten. So share everything, play fair, don't hit people, put things back where you found them, clean up your own mess, don't take things that are not yours, say you're sorry when you hurt somebody, wash your hands before you eat, flush, warm cookies and cold milk are good for you, live a balanced life, learn some, think some, draw and paint and sing and dance, play and work every day some. Take a nap every afternoon. When you go out into the world, watch out for traffic, hold hands and stick together. Be aware of wonder. Remember, the little seed in the styrofoam cup, the roots go down and the plant goes up, and nobody really knows how or why. But we all like that. Goldfish and hamsters and white mice, and even the little the little seed in the styrofoam cup, they all die. So do we. And then remember the Dick and Jane book, and the first word you learned, the biggest word of all, look. So just look at this. Everything is there here in the early years. The seeds of this need to be sown. The habits of this need to be sown here. Okay. So this is the significance, and this is actually the curriculum of early childhood education. Yep. So I want to move into the section where I want to really talk about the quality of early years. Yes, we all have, I mean, everybody now today, all the children go to some kind of a preschool experience they have. But what is the quality in the early years? It's very important for us to figure that out. So the quality really is equal to preparation, it's equal to readiness. It is not actually the phrase for it is the 3 R's, readiness for the 3 R's, reading, writing, and arithmetic. That entails the curriculum of the early years. So we need to prepare the children. And I think people close to the rural areas, people who are, you know, in the farming profession, they all understand what preparation really means. You don't sow a seed just like that. You prepare the soil, you till the soil, you know, you wait for the right time, you get you sow the seed, and then depending on, you know, the climatic conditions of that, you water, don't water, you know, depending on what the nature of the plant is, you provide, you know how much water to provide. So it's an entire process. It's not that I sow the seed today and I get the you know, the result the next day or the following day. So this respecting the nature, respecting the process, I think somewhere we lost that. So the quality really is preparation or readiness. So what? Preparation or readiness for what? So this forms the crux of the early years. If you want to call it the curriculum or the syllabus or whatever you want to call it. Actually, curriculum and syllabus are not the same, which we'll come to in a while. So this is how a good early years program should look like. It should contain a rich fine motor development environment. There should be abundant activities for personal, social, emotional growth, and a very enriching language environment, scientific temper, arithmetic readiness, and bridging for transition. So these are the 6 parameters or the criteria that will decide the quality of a good early childhood education program. So the first one is, let's just spend a few minutes here on each of these parameters.
I think your screen is frozen. You might want to stop sharing once and then share it again.
Okay. All right. Is it visible now?
You have to share it once again.
Is it visible?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah. So we are on fine motor development, and so I think we've all heard this word. I mean, this phrase, fine motor development, and we do lip service to it. And I'm sorry to say I'm making a blanket statement on this because I've seen n number of schools say, yes, we do activities for fine motor development, maybe for a month or so, and then they hand over the pencil to the child and say, and give 4 lines and the square notebook, and they are supposed to write. Now, this is not how fine motor development works. So if you look at this, the growth, how it happens is, this is the shoulder. So if you look at children's movements, they are large movements to begin with. So this is where they operate from. Then sufficient activities given to them to stabilize this area, then the elbow, then they are able to control the forearm. I mean, this portion of the arm, and they are working from the elbow. And once the elbow, there are sufficient activities given for them for this kind of controlled movement, then that's when the wrist develops. They move on to the finer work. And once the wrist is developed, or not developed, but stabilized, then you move on to the fingers. So this entire process of moving from the shoulder to the fingers takes somewhere about 3 to 4 years. But we don't give sufficient time for this. So the purpose is to, as I said, we are readying the children for formal schooling. Formal schooling requires that the child writes using the pencil. But we cannot hand over the pencil at 3 years or 4 years. We need to give crayons, and that too the crayons of a size which will, a 3-year-old or a 4-year-old can have it. And then we graduate them to other writing tools. So fine motor, and just not one activity. So we need to create a pool of activities for fine motor development, so that 4 years of the children, 4 years, we have enough activities for children to be occupied with fine motor development.
Can you use the slideshow mode?
Yes.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope it's visible.
Yes.
Yeah. So then we move on to personal, social, emotional development. So the personal, social, emotional development is also something which remains in the books of child psychology or child development. But I think this forms the crux of the entire curriculum, early childhood curriculum. So personal development is all about establishing an identity, who I am physically, then emotionally who I am, what kind of feelings I go through, and the kind of feelings and the kind of experiences children face during these years with no vocabulary to express. There is mayhem in children's life, and there is no opportunity for children to express these at all. At all, I'm underlining this. And as far as social development goes, there is no scope for children to enjoy a solitary play. There's no scope for children to enjoy pure play. There's no scope for children to, enjoy just a small group play. So this whole trajectory of social development takes a while. It takes about 3 to 4 years until they're ready to work in, groups of 4 or 5. So any kind of competition, any kind of, rubbing against each other between children is a big no during this stage. So we know that, of course, but we helplessly get into it because we don't know how to substitute this. We don't know what are the activities we can give. One of the very important tools for personal, social, emotional development, which we use very rampantly in our school, is circle time. Then on language, again, it is all about readiness to, to read and write. It is not reading and writing. So how do you ready the children? Immense number of conversations, immense number of stories. So there should be a volume of these kind of activities being done, so that, and drawing, art and craft, cutting, pasting, all of this should be in varieties, in a very rich form, so that we are able to occupy children from 3 to 6.5, 7 years with these kind of activities. Then on scientific temper, I think children are, scientists, inborn scientists, and this particularly this age group, they are so curious. They are, completely sensory motor. So they're already scientists. So all we need to do is to, capitalize on that and kind of expand their, their thinking and asking questions and hypothesizing and discovering and all of that. So, all kinds of activities related to that: water play, field trip. Field trip should be done once in 15 days. Water play, sand play, nature walk, exploring, engaging with animals and insects, and all those kinds of things. Then we have the arithmetic readiness. Arithmetic readiness is often confused with arithmetic itself, numbers itself, but there is a whole scheme of things which will take 3 years for us to complete in order for taking children to computation. And, I'm just touching on that. And then there is this important aspect which we may kind of ignore, is bridging. It's very important to bridge the transition from the early years to the formal schooling. So this, we need to spend sufficient amount of time and a system needs to be developed around bridging the transiting the children from early years to formal schooling. So essentially, what we want to say is a rich early years curriculum is equal to an uncompromising, developmentally appropriate curriculum led by the children, driven by the children. So the choice is ours. Do we want to draw out from the children what is already there within them, or do we want to, just fill up the children with information, whatever? So I'm not sure about the time. How much time do I have, Praveen?
We have another 5 minutes.
Okay, great. So I think I'll finish it. I'm not sure what the screen, it kind of freezes off and on. So sorry about that. Okay, so so what is a curriculum? Like I said some time back, to ask children, ask the educated community or the community in education, what is a curriculum? Invariably, they will be, say it is syllabus. Curriculum is not the syllabus. One of the very good analogies given was, which I learned very early, was the carriage. Any carriage that you draw a carriage, and the imprint it leaves behind, the tracks that it leaves behind is the curriculum. So the curriculum is drawing. That is, the tracks will be drawing, painting, cutting, pasting, field trips, conversations, first-hand concrete experiences, manipulative. This forms the chunk of your curriculum. This will drive the school. And what are the carriages? So the carriages is observation. Teachers to make observation and make notes, to know what kind of thinking, what kind of needs children have, so that themes can be drawn from that, topics can be drawn from that, and integrated plan can be made in order to give experiences to children, and have, of course, behavioral measurable learning outcomes and assessment parameters. That will be the syllabus actually. And what will be the wheels? It will be your daily schedule, which will be a balance between active and quiet activities, individual. What happened?
Your screen sharing is missing.
Yeah, the wheels is the daily schedule, which is a balance between active and quiet activities, individual and group activities, indoor and outdoor activities, and free and structured activities. And the fuel is from the finances, HR, and administration. So this is something which I keep repeating. Finance, HR, and administration cannot be the center based around which these will work. This will be the center, the tracks will be the center around which the finances will work, or the HR will work. I don't know. Okay. The key question we have to ask today is, why have we diluted the early years? How come we give the lip service, and how come we are not, we feel it's just early childhood. Their children are very young, it's okay. And along with it comes the disrespect that goes with the teaching community of that particular stage. So what's in it for us to take the early years so lightly? And for me, I think we all very anxious people. We are ourselves very traumatized. If you look at this, I thought this was a very powerful statement made. Trauma decontextualized over time looks like personality. Trauma decontextualized over time looks like family traits, and decontextualized over time looks like culture. So we've become a very anxious culture. We have become a very result-driven culture. For us, it's so important to, to compete, to be at the helm. And of course, I don't have to say, we all know that IITs and IIMs and, Stanford, these have become so much important for us. And hence, this is what drives the entire early years, and perhaps dilutes the, the preschool, the early years. So I'll stop here. In case we have any questions, I will, kind of share what I need to share if I need to.
Yeah, thank you, ma'am.
Yeah.
We'll start off with a couple of quick questions.
Sure.
One is the early childhood education space in India as of today is an unregulated space. So what happens in those 3 years, whether it is in kindergarten or Montessori, is more or less left to the wisdom of the school or the teacher handling. Now, that is where a lot of conflict also arises, where in Montessori, where phonics is practiced while teaching kids, when the kid enters first standard in school, A is pronounced as A, while the kid might have learned it as A. That conflict kind of perennially is seen as a kid not learning, or having challenges with learning, but is not seen as a challenge with the system. So the NEP also talks about bridging that gap, and their early childhood education being a very important part of education and so on. But have there been any models within India or outside where early childhood education is not seen as a separate entity, but it is part of the school education as a whole, where there are formative years which are for preparedness, and then there is actual schooling that happens?
Yes. Yes, there are islands of excellence, and the models are there in the form of Godrej School. As on today, I don't know. Times have changed in the last 5-10 years, but I know the Godrej School in Mumbai stuck to it, to the fact that early years it was sanctity not to move out of the intent of early years. Then we had the school in Sardar Patel Vidyalaya in Delhi. It was a very much a part and parcel of the entire school, and the bridging was done and very, very smoothly. They kept, and it was a public school. It was not one of the the elite schools or one of those schools which which stood out. So there are models. So the point is, it is like we talk about the political will. We have to talk about the will of the head of the school. The head of the school needs to believe, have the conviction that this is what it is. We cannot dilute it. We cannot compromise on this. So this has to be conveyed to the entire school, to the primary, middle, and the high school, that this is not going to be compromised. Whatever needs to be done, we will do after that. So, and parallelly, the early years community, the teachers and the staff, need to be given a lot more boost, lot more encouragement to stick on to that, to stick on to what they are doing. Because you also have parents coming. See, education is one sector where everybody, all the entire community, the entire nation knows what to do, except the educators. So when we go, like I keep telling this to the teachers, we go to a doctor, we go to any professional, to an architect, they tell us what to do and we follow. We don't question them. But when it comes to school, and especially early years, the school is dictated. We are compared, that school does this, that the children there do this, the children here don't do this. So unless the teachers are made to become professionals and they understand the significance of what they are doing, the contribution they are making, I think it will continue to remain the way. Then it'll be like in piecemeal. So,
on a lighter note, ma'am, I have friends who are doctors and architects, and they also complain that now their clients do a lot of Googling and then come back with a lot of inputs.
Yeah.
So even patients are no
Right.
longer faithful patients.
Yes.
Okay. One more question. In 2007, there was a study which was done on the early childhood education across India. They had picked up 3 states and sampled a few Anganwadi centers, some private early childhood education centers. There were 3 interesting things which they highlighted. One was that against popular thought that access to early childhood education is no longer a challenge. Enough kids actually have access. But what is missing is what happens once a kid attends an early childhood center. In the public centers, that is the centers run by the government, which are the Anganwadi centers, a lot of time is spent on doing nothing. And in the private centers, a lot of time is actually spent on the 3 R's and not on the preparedness part, which you mentioned. Now, how do we address these gaps? Now, because it is unregulated, because there is scope for actually bringing in some creativity and bringing in some freshness of thought, things don't seem to align.
Yeah, so I must tell you that in the 90s, NCERT took it up in a big way, and they brought a fresh wave of looking at early years in a very, very, structured manner, very, very religious manner. And Anganwadis flourished at that time. Rural Anganwadis were flourishing at that time. And I don't know, the IIT Delhi ran a preschool under the ages of NCRT, completely under the ages of NCRT for the class 4 children of the class 4 workers. And they were all running absolutely smooth. There was no problem until, see what happens is the dilution happens at the block development officers level. The instructions come, the materials come, training is being given, but the teachers are, like you said, are used for other things other than enriching the children. So I don't know the solution. See, one of the reasons why I wanted to share this perspective on this platform is that the system is something that cannot be beaten up individually. It is not possible. So it has to be a collective effort by schools, by educational institutions to say that we mean business. We will not waver from what we are meant to do in the early years. Any section I'm talking, but early years particularly, we are not willing to dilute. Now, the government school teachers do not have the authority to say, if the authority is telling you, please go and collect data or do something else, they have to just follow suit. They have no other choice. For that matter, even the private school teachers have no choice, because the education system is interfering even in the private schools to say that, no, you have to have these registers filled, that records filled, you have to tick mark this and tick mark that. So I think, and also I think one of the big problems I find is the people sitting in the education offices I don't think they have a vision at all of education. Forget about early years. So if they have a vision, they will see, they will watch, they will observe, they'll say, okay, we'll leave them alone. They are managing. So I think their role should be to police the schools for other matters, like whether if it's an abuse matter, if it's a disciplining issue. Of course, they can come in and kind of intervene and do what they have to do, but not this daily ticking and assessment. You do this, you do that. That kind of stifles. But the solution is the head of the school, the head of the institution needs to put a foot down and say, sorry, we are not doing it.
One more question from Satish sir.
Hmm.
He has asked a question. In the early years, if they are unattended, is the damage to learning long term, or can it be undone?
Yeah,
what are options?
that's a very great question. I'm very happy somebody actually asked this question. Thank you, Mr. Satish. And that's why now I think Ramesh will know. That's the reason why I titled it The Prana of Well-being. I mentioned it in the passing. The children from 3 years to 8 years have no vocabulary, but they experience everything. There is an example given about a monkey. When the baby monkey is swinging along with the mother, the baby monkey holds the monkey very tight. How does that monkey know that if she leaves the mother, she'll fall down? So inherently, every life form knows what is going right, what is not going right, whatever he or she is experiencing in the environment, whether it is parents fighting, whether it is abuse, whether it is conflict, whether it is disagreement, whether it is justice, whether it is fairness, everything the child is experiencing and the child is getting it. But the child has no vocabulary to even talk about it or to express it. So how do we draw it out from the child? That is the purpose of the personal, social, emotional development. We have to have abundant stories, abundant situations, abundant avenues for the children to express, so that they know it's come out of the system. Yes, it has a very, very far-reaching effect, what we do in the early years. To an extent, it can be undone. of what happened in the early years. So it is very, very tough. Yes, like Mr. Satish has said, undoing the wrong, doing the right things is easier than undoing the things. Yes, that's true. That's true. It's very hard to undo. So if you look at the last 1 year, why have the need for mental health professionals gone up so much? It shouldn't be, because we are quite an intelligent nation now, at least in the urban spaces and even in the rural spaces. So why would we need? We know it all. We have Google, like you said, it's just at the fingertip. We have to follow rules. Just not following rules is a very important thing. It tells a lot about how much I resist authority. And that's coming from the early years. So I think, yes, it is very true. And that is why I wanted to use the space to convey that let's not take early years so lightly. Let us give it its due. Let us give children the due. And, and here, see, at the end of it, like the question, Mr. Satish's question is very pertinent, because we come from a background where we believe in the law of karma, right? So there is a lot of karma. But because we come from the land of law of karma, there are karmic factors which we give due respect to, but we cannot say this karma, so we let go of the early years and allow things to happen the way, it's okay. Didn't we grow up? Did we have these kind of issues? This is the first thing we ask. But I think, yes, it's a very, very important question. And I would consider this sharing of my perspective a success just with this one question. I'm very happy that this question came up.
Ramesh?
I think, yeah, you spoke about the indigenous educational system that existed prior to colonization and the localization of education itself in our country. One of the aspects of that system of education was that children typically entered the schools, at least in the Bengal presidency as well as in the Chennai presidency and all of those places, Madras presidency, roughly at the age of about 6 to 7. That's typically what was. So my question is, do you think the children need to go to school at 3 years? Is it a very convenient way for nuclear parents coming out of nuclear families to push children into a system where they can be structured, taught, tutored to behave in a particular way and not let children be as they should and grow naturally?
True. And that's why your session, one of your sessions on homeschooling was ideal. We don't need to send children to preschool at all, actually. There is no need. But it's become an industry now because, and we all know it. I mean, we have commercialized the whole thing, and we're doing that more damage than anything else. So there is no need, actually, provided parents are willing to invest that kind of time and that kind of giving an enriching time for the children. Why not? And in fact, I think one of the things that we are very strongly advocating is to look at rural also as very a rich space where children can be provided enriching environment there. Maybe the parents are not equipped to give that, but we can retain them in the rural spaces and give them a good experience. We need not call it a school at all. We don't have to construct a school to give them that experience. So we need to just ready them. And yes, I agree with you. We don't need to send children to school, preschools at all. But it's not a very practical thing today, at least, because parents are all employed, they're working. It's not possible.
I think that is what Mr. Satish also says in the chat box, and it is a valid point that with both parents working and not knowing where to let them go, which is what I alluded to also in the earlier question. The second question I had is that right from a very young age, children today seem to be taught to. I'm not saying that they need to be obedient, do only what they are told, but essentially, I think increasingly what's happening is in these schools and other things, children are taught to conform to a structure. I think there is too much structure in what they are being taught. And in the
Sure.
whole issue of, if you look at the national education policy itself, uh, there is this school of thought. There's a lot of research that also goes into that's also looked at this and said that a little bit of unstructured learning at a younger age is far better than letting forcing children through a system, because we are essentially we are using the input throughput output kind of a thing, where we want to make all children very similar rather than have exceptional talents emerge out of
Hmm.
the system. So the system has taken over the this one. So
Yep.
what your thoughts on that, and how do you think is there a solution at all, given that this has become a
Yeah, I want to in fact talk of two models, and Praveen had asked this question. There is this high scope model, which I don't know if anybody uses anymore, and there is this Reggio Emilia model. Both of these models are completely children driven. There is no conformity, there is no system. Children are given choices. Children, the whole idea is to see what the children are interested in and create a syllabus based on what the children need. So there is no system, and there is no conformity needed at all. Choices need to be given to children. But why we are doing this conformity is, see, because you want to send the children to class 1 or class 2. So the class 2 teacher or the class 1 teacher who picks up the child from kindergarten, she says, you have not even prepared the child to write. He cannot even write on the book. He cannot read. What have you done? So the pressure goes down, and that's how the system has become so stifling and conforming in the early years. So this is what I mean by the downward extension. This is what I mean by the anxiety driven. We are an anxiety driven system. The child should pass in the class 12 or get good grades in class 12 and class 10. So you begin it in kindergarten. And second important thing in this is the transition. So even if we have a non-conforming environment like the high scope model or the Reggio Emilia model, now all said and done, the child has to enter into a formal setup. So he has to be readied for a formal setup. You cannot just put him there and plonk him there. He'll be lost. So the transitioning is very important. That's why bridging the gap between a non-conforming system to a conforming system is very important.
Right.
So that's the way it has to go. There's no other way to deal with this.
Praveen, you had
Yeah. Ma'am, one of the key stakeholders in this entire process is the teacher or the facilitator.
Mm.
Now, unfortunately, there's so much of stratification. We have lower primary schools, higher primary schools, secondary and senior secondary, and even teachers are seen to be in those cadres. Lower primary are the lowest cadre of teachers are, and early childhood education teachers are not even on the radar. But how do we turn this around? Again, one is it practical? When we say that we should get a lot of people interested in early childhood education, or we should get the best teachers into early childhood education, the present setup, is it practical, or can we do better with the existing resources?
Yeah. So I think you had a session also on agriculture and farmers, and I strongly feel the teaching community itself, for that matter, compared to the other professions, have a lower self-esteem. Okay, number one. So many of the good professionals outside would not want to come into the teaching profession, and we all know why. Then within the teaching community, as you said, there is gradation. If I'm a 12th standard teacher, I'm a bit, I'm somewhere there in the hierarchy. If I'm a middle school, I'm somewhere there. So this is created by whom? This is created by us. So if we do not professionalize our existing teachers, we are not going to get a new crop of people who are going to be interested, provided we professionalize this whole entire early years education, make it very challenging for the educators, and they want to come and, then and of course pay them very well on par with the secondary school teachers. pay them well, and they are the foundation for the rest of the school. So if there is pride in saying that, I have 10% results or I have toppers in my school, it is because the early years teachers have contributed. So you cannot negate that fact. So equalize their pace, make them, professional, train them. So with the existing group of teachers, it is possible. And unless we do that, we are not going to get a new crop of teachers who are going to be interested in early years education.
One of the sort of, if I may say, a counter argument for the importance being given to ECCE is the Finnish model or the European system, where kids actually enter a formal school very late as compared to what they do in India. So why do we require schooling so early in India as compared to there? What is the difference in the context?
See, the Finnish model has come off late, right? It's a recent one. But the Reggio Emilia model has been there for a long time. The high scope model has been there for a very long time. Then, of course, the pressure of starting formal schooling is because we, as Indians, we are always pressured. We always want things done, and there is so much going around saying Indian children in the United States do much better than the American students. Why? Because they're good at spelling, they are tutored for it, they are wired for it. I don't know what it is, but then we have this thing, we have, as a community, as a nation, we feel, we have to know everything. And the worst part in this is the urban schools become the role model for the rural schools. So rural schools want to emulate the urban schools. So it's not that, okay, let us have a different model here. No, we want to be one like St. Joseph or one like something else. So let us all, that is the role model. So who's creating this? We are creating. So why doesn't one leader or a few leaders just break this cycle and say, no, we are not doing this. We are going to, and still our children can give the board exam. Why don't we challenge ourselves? We will make sure that our children give the board exam. Even you take CBSE or ICSE for that matter, they don't dictate terms at all. They intervene only in the 8th standard. They're saying you follow the syllabus. Till then, they say do what you want. But you look at any CBSE school, the pressure is there from the kindergarten. And who's creating it? The system in the school system, the school management. So I think it's time for us to reflect. We're all educated. We see the education system, our education system has brought us this far. So it is time now for us to give back to the education system meaningfully, rather than crumble the whole thing and, create individuals, create a nation which is all scattered all over the place meaninglessly. So I think it is we who have to start it. There's no other way to do it.
One question from the teacher education point of view. The present diploma in elementary education, which is a 2-year program preparing teachers for the elementary education part, has, if I may say, reduced entire preparation for early childhood education to 12 days of training. What is it that should get included to actually prepare teachers for early childhood education instead of those? I think we seem to be we are carried away with 12 days of training and more than what is there in those 12 days of training.
Sure. But I think it would be something is better than nothing. At least you're not sending somebody into the early years with nothing, raw. So they must say, okay, 12 days. Something is better than nothing. So, we have all these jugards in our country. We do these so that we are able to take care of that age group of children. But I think institutions like SVYM or even the Azim Premji, all of these institutions should stand up and become a role model for these kind of questions that are coming up, and create a model. We need not create a J. Krishnamurti school. We need not create a school which is an island by itself. We'll create a school which will run the regular, the boards, whatever the boards demand, and give a board exam, but in a very developmentally appropriate way, and formulate a system within the school so that the children are able to move from one section to the other section and upgrade themselves. So from the primary, if they go to the middle school, we have to upgrade them. But you have already sown the seeds in the early years for all of this. So it will be a cakewalk once the children move into the higher classes. So it should not be. So first and foremost, our guards and anxieties have to come down. We have to bring that down first.
Just had a small observation on one of the things on the earlier point that you brought about Indians doing well in the United States and everything. While that is true, I think there is also the point about you have a Sundar, you have a Satya, you have many of these people, but all of them are still cogs in the wheel. Many Indians still remain cogs in the wheel. They're not creating new stuff, new things. They're not uh, they're not pushing the envelope in terms of moving things, doing new things. We rarely see Jeff Bezos, or we rarely see. I mean, if you have Amazon, you have Flipkart following up on that. So essentially, there is something that is. I mean, we have to admit that there is something wrong that within the system. We talk
Yes.
of child-centered education. We cite all of this, but there is something that is not making our children become those. They're not creators in that sense. I mean,
Correct. So it goes back to your earlier question of conformity, right? And everything we have conformity, right? From holding the pencil to drawing to coloring, what color to use. So if a child wants to create something, it's a basic thing. If he wants to create a drawing, and the child creates, say, a tree, and he uses a purple color tree, we say, how can a tree be purple? Instead of asking, what made you draw, what is the color, why did you choose a purple color, or encouraging a conversation, we have conformed. We said, no, it has to be green, it has to be brown. So this is how we conform, because it is convenient for the adults. No, it is very convenient for the adults to conform the child rather than create, because then they don't have to research, they don't have to invest their energy on answering questions or digging, researching together. So I think it's more true with our Indian psyche also. We are quite a top-down approach in parenting. We have a top-down approach in a whole lot of things. So, but now with a lot of exposure, with a lot of leadership, which is changing across in all the industries, and even in the corporate, people are experimenting with so many things. But one thing to what you're saying, Ramesh, is the risk-taking ability is very, very minimal in our country. In fact, I think in the 80s or 90s, and it continues to be the same now, not very different. Now, look at today's crisis that we are in. Nobody wants to take the risk. We are still, so anxiety driven. So there is one person who will say, no, I don't want the bed because I'm already 80 plus. And so you please give the bed to somebody. This man is highlighted. This man is deified. It's common sense. So we have lost our common sense. We don't allow children to function with common sense. We kind of fill the child with, we condition the child with our kind of thoughts. So this continues. So where will you break the cycle? It is in the cycle. So I think the answer to all the questions that have been raised today is that each one of us needs to take a stand on this. There is, and in the positions that we are in, the roles that we are playing, we need to expand. We need to, kind of question and make our whatever work we are doing substantial.
thank you. I think we can go to closing remarks. 2 minutes of closing remarks followed by.
Yep. So essentially, my message is this: that that going back to the tree and the bird perched on the tree and the fruit falling down. So I invite all of us to look at it from this point of view. This is Krishna's message to Arjuna. When Arjuna was devastated, he said, "I'm not going to fight the war, and I'm not going to kill." So he said, "You're not killing anybody. You are just an instrument." That is why he says, "Nimitta matram bhava savya sachin." You are just a nimitta. You are a hetu. You are not the person who's going to give results. So I think the message, the closing remark I have is that we need to do what we are meant to do. We are not going to be doing what is expected, what is norm. We need to start questioning. We need to do what we are meant to do as a teacher, as an administrator, as a head of the school, and allow every stage of education to flourish for what it is meant to be. We cannot dilute that. And I don't think we have the right to do that. We have to work on it.
Thank you, ma'am.
So that will be my takeaway. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I think the
Thank you
strongest
for-
message from you has been that teachers have to stand for themselves, find their voice, and do what they think is right.
Yep.
In the space of early childhood education, a lot has been happening in the last few years. There has been an ECCE policy that came out. There is an NEP which talks a lot about ECCE now. Hopefully, we'll be doing a much better job in this age group with this age group of students.
Just one correction, Praveen.
Yeah.
The teachers need to stand up as much as the administrators and the leaders in the school need to stand up and give the required support. So I think it has to start with a dialogue between the two parties so that, and they come to an agreement, and the teachers need to continue to take a stand, and, that's how it needs to go. Teachers alone will not be able to start it off.
Thank you.
Sorry. Yeah, thank you.
On a lighter note, just before I end, when you spoke about conformity, it reminded me of one of Ken Robinson's lecture. He narrates one small incident. Supposedly, there was a 5-year-old who was drawing something, and the art teacher asks her, "What are you drawing?" The kid says, "I'm drawing God." And the art teacher responds saying that no one has seen God as yet. So supposedly the kid responded back, said, "Wait for 10 minutes, I'll show you how God will look like." Imagine the same incident and the maturity with which, as a teacher, I would have responded. Saying that we would have shown a portrait saying that this is how God looks like. Okay.
True,
Thank you.
true.
Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you
for
very
being
much.
a part of this lecture. Join us next week. Have a great weekend. Stay safe.
Thank you. Thank you. Good night.